Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this hour. The Department of Research and Publication has a number of fellowship and scholarship programs. The Dissertation Writing Scholarship is one of them that is awarded every year. In 2024, the Dissertation Writing Scholarship was awarded to our today's guest lecturer, Vineet Gupta. Vineet Gupta is a PhD candidate in the Graduate Department of Religion at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, USA. He previously holds a bachelor and master degree in history from the University of Delhi, India, and another master degree in South Asian studies, majoring in history from Heidelberg University, Germany. The discussant of today's lecture is Dr. Daģī Daģiev, is a senior research associate at the IIS at the Institute of Isma'ili Studies. Daģī is also coordinating the IIS scholarship and fellowship programs. Daģī completed his MPhil degree in Eurasian Studies from Oxford University and PhD from Department of Political Science at University of College London. Thank you, and without further ado, Vineet.
Thank you, Dr. Negina Amir-Bozkunova, for this very kind introduction and all your assistance for organizing this talk. I also appreciate Dr. Daģī Daģiev for moderating this session. My sincere gratitude goes to the IIS for awarding me the Dissertation Writing Scholarship and for providing me this wonderful platform to share and promote my scholarship. I'm truly humbled by this recognition. Finally, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the audience for taking the time to attend this talk. So my dissertation explores the shifts in the virtues of authority among the Daʻudi Bohras in the 19th and early 20th centuries, which I'm completing at Vanderbilt University under the supervision of Professor Samira Sheikh. So I would also take this opportunity to express my gratitude to her and to other members on my dissertation committee. So let me start by introducing you to Daʻudi Bohras. Daʻudi Bohras are Shia Isma'ili Mustali Tayyibis who recognized 21 Fatimid Imams in the lineage of Prophet Muhammad's daughter Fatima and son-in-law Ali. Their last visible Imam, Al-Tayyib, was taken into concealment in 1132. Theologically, the link bridging the 9 centuries in between is the unbroken lineage of their living preceptors, the Du'at al-Mutlaqin, or Du'at in short, or in singular form Dāʿī al-Mutlaq, or dāʿī, the summoner with total authority, who represents the Fatimid Imam in seclusion. The office of the dāʿī was established in Yemen in 1138. In 1567, the spiritual seat was taken to Gujarat, India, on the account of existential threat. Following a succession feud in the 16th century, the Indian adherents of the sect, primarily merchants, or in Gujarati, Bohra, established an independent line of leadership under Daud bin Qutb Shah, and hence they were called Daʻudi Bohras. From the 19th century onwards, the Daʻudi Bohras brought to the fore an integral, but temporarily and spatially distant aspect of their tradition, Fatimid Ismailism. This orientation has seen an Indic Ismaili Jamaat of merchants transformed into a global Ismaili community with its presence in more than 40 countries today, that asserts its claim as the true inheritor of the Fatimid legacy. Such interpretations have also seen the perception of the dāʿī shifting from a mu'jiza or miracle-performing Murshid-e-Kamil, that is, the ideal guide, to a knowledge-centric figure, the dāʿī al-Fatimi, linked to the Imam through an uninterrupted bond of spiritual knowledge passed down in the lineage of these holy men. Relying exclusively on sectarian literature or recent ethnographic studies, modern scholarship highlights the continuity between Fatimid tradition and the present-day Bohras. Such assertions, however, have led to systematic downplaying of Bohras' Indic comportments, ethics, and notions of authority, and have had significant implications for the post-colonial identity of the Bohras and Muslim communities in South Asia. In contrast, drawing on Bohri exoteric texts written in Arabic, Gujarati, and Lisan al-Dāwa, that is a highly Arabicized and arcane form of Gujarati, that are available in public domain, colonial archives, and ethnographic research, my dissertation situates these claims within their historical contexts that allow such a discourse to have emerged. I argue that although the cultural reorientation to Fatimid Egypt has shifted the Dawa's vision of its past and the foundations of Da'i's authority, the Fatimid layer of tradition continues to be supplemented by another layer of tradition representing the cultural commercial context of pre-modern Gujarat. My research indicates that the dāʿī's authority emerges from a complex interplay of spiritual and material, ceremonial and legal, as well as ethical and genealogical sources, drawing from both local traditions and the Fatimid background of the dāwa. As such, far from conceiving authority as a fixed and static concept, I conceptualize authority as a dynamic process, which is continually in the making, open to contestation, and circumscribed by material conditions on the ground. More so, scholars of Islam tend to approach authority through Arab and Arabic-centric perceptions, ignoring the complex and creative ways in which Muslim leaders frame authority in non-Arab settings. Therefore, moving beyond Arab and Arabic-centric approaches, I argue for a context-inflected nature of authority in Islam in South Asia. Lastly, while the collective weight of scholarship is largely towards mystics and monarchs, this project seeks to shift the focus to Muslim merchants to understand authority in Islam in South Asia. Simultaneously, it shows how they navigated the challenges of colonial modernity, adapting to new administrative and legal frameworks, as well as evolving epistemological paradigms in reinforcing their power and status. This texture of authority only becomes apparent when it is analyzed through a diverse set of sources and a multi-modal range of methods and theories derived from the fields of history, religious studies, and anthropology of Islam in South Asia. This project is conceptualized around 4 junctures or themes where the articulation of authority is most evident. These are the discourse surrounding origins and genealogy, ethical virtues of khidmat or service, law and reform, and lastly, public rituals. So, in this presentation, I will elaborate on one such theme, which is the first chapter in my dissertation and examines the valorization of Fatimid Isma'ili spiritual origins and genealogy among the Bohras starting the early 19th century. The chapter argues that the early 19th century Orientalist interpretations of Bohra's past prompted the community to revisit its origin history and redefine the notions of authority, while also enabling them to claim an ostensibly Islamic origin and an honorable status with their new political patrons, the British. Nonetheless, this new discourse did not eliminate the older traditions entrenched in the local mercantile and Rajput context, through which the Bohra leadership continued to assert claims to authority. Who are Daʻudi Bohras? Beginning the 19th century, British scholar administrators in India undertook concerted efforts to answer this question. In 1801, Henry Thomas Colebrook, a legal scholar and the leading Sanskritist of his time, penned an essay on the origin and peculiar tenets of certain Mohammedan sects focused on the Daʻudi Bohras. Colebrook's primary purpose was to codify the law governing the community from their foundational or doctrinal texts in Arabic, through which he believed he could also locate the origin of the Bohras in a specific branch of Islam. Based on a misinterpretation of a Persian text, Majalis al-Mumineen, written by Qazi Nurullah Shustari at the turn of 16th century in Lahore, Colebrook declared the Bohras as true or 12er Shias. Notably, Colebrook concluded that the Bohras had been wrongfully identified as Ismailis and that there were no Ismailis in India. Nonetheless, he did not completely reject the possibility of a connection between the two groups. In fact, he guided the prospective research in a specific direction, suggesting that Orientalist scholarship could potentially establish what South Asians did not know about. In a footnote, he added, if the industrious Bohras and the remorseless assassins had really arisen out of the same sect, it would be a new fact in the history of human mind. By remorseless assassins, Colebrook was alluding to the Nizari Ismailis of Iran and Syria, who had formed an independent dāwa or mission or call or path after their separation from the Fatimid Caliphate in 1094. As Professor Farhad Daftari has explained in his much acclaimed scholarship, this abhorrence towards Nizari Ismailis was rooted in a long history of Christian-Muslim interactions. Ismailis had been invariably degraded as hashish smoking, zealously devoted assassins in Christian crusade accounts. Similarly, in medieval Sunni accounts, they were labeled as Malahidas, apostate or deviants, and Rafizis, rejectionists or heretics. In the wake of Napoleonic conquest of Egypt and Syria, spanning between 1798 and 1801, the European interest in the Ismailis was rekindled. Although modern Orientalists were aware of the Egyptian and Persian branches of Ismailism, they were apparently unaware of the existence of various Ismaili communities in the Indian subcontinent. This newfound curiosity motivated British ethnographers and officers and missionaries and travelers eager for fame and fortune to find traces of assassin groups in the East. Such curiosities had acquired a particular imperialist character after the 1820s. So in 1823, John Malcolm, a British field marshal and later the governor of Bombay, rocked the European intellectual world by forging a direct spiritual lineage between the Bohras and the so-called medieval order of assassins. Based on arbitrary comparison of certain customary practices, such as the secrecy surrounding their customs and manners, inaccessibility to their residential localities, and hierarchical organization under a hereditary leadership, Malcolm states, Bohras are in conformity with the ancient precepts of the remarkable sect of Mohammedans to which they belong. They are the tribe of Hassanis, once so dreaded in Egypt and Persia for the acts of murder and desperation which they perpetrated in blind obedience to the mandate of their spiritual lord, so famous in the Crusade history under the name of the Old Man of the Mountain. In Malcolm's analysis, the Persian Ismaili leadership was built upon mystic and messianic foundations, converging the spiritual and temporal realms of authority. In his History of Persia, Malcolm rebuked Ismailis and Sufis for inciting rebellion against the state and undermining its legitimacy by subverting law and order. Malcolm's discomfort is quite symptomatic of the British attitude towards the spiritual leaders who staked a claim for temporal sovereignty. This configuration of authority of Dawoodi leadership, however, which Malcolm was suggesting, was no different from various rulers and Hindu, Sikh, and Sufi spiritual preceptors who similarly consolidated their authority by melding the spiritual with the temporal. However, overlooking the local precedents, Malcolm sought to find parallels in medieval Persia. This also suggests that for the Orientalists, neither the source of origin of a Muslim community was in South Asia, nor their framework of authority could be drawn from the region. While the Orientalist theories, excuse me, linking the Bohras with the creed of assassins were damning, they only added to long-standing intersectarian debates among South Asian Muslims, where Bohras occupied a rather precarious or vulnerable position. In medieval and early modern Persian accounts, Bohras have been labeled as Malahidas or Rafizis due to doctrinal and political differences, leading to their persecution under the Sunni sultans of Gujarat. Mughal Prince Aurangzeb, as the governor of Gujarat, executed the 32nd Dāʿī Qutb Khan Qutbuddin on the account of heresy and took punitive measures against the Bohras, which compelled them to adopt precautionary dissimulation or taqiyya. This ethic perception, however, stands in stark contrast with the Bohra self-perception as they describe themselves as true believers or mu'mineen, and their path as the rightly guided mission of Islam, ad-dāwa al-hadi al-Islam. Furthermore, although the British were uncomfortable with the notions of Dāʿī's authority, they relied on the Bohras for intelligence gathering and streaming European goods into Indian markets, a fact well documented in Orientalist accounts. Malcolm also appreciated Bohra's adoption of a lifestyle that mirrors European standards and their strategic alliance with powerful groups such as Rajputs. His assessment implies that, unlike their spiritual ancestors, who he was thinking the assassins, the Nizari assassins, the British viewed the Bohras as a pacified and a prosperous bunch. Historians have shown that Bohras, like other merchant communities, not only welcomed, but in fact facilitated the British takeover of Surat in 1800. Under British patronage, the Bohras were able to practice their faith without resorting to protective dissimulation, and could expand their commercial networks in the wider Indian Ocean world. To leverage British patronage fully, the Dawoodi leadership had to demonstrate its loyalty to the colonial state without staking any claims in its territorial sovereignty. More so, in the new political order, honor and status were increasingly determined by the descent, prompting local leaders to commission illustrious genealogical histories. It is therefore reasonable to propose that the findings of Orientalist scholars raised several questions about the origins of the Bohras, instigating them to revisit their past. However, this situation also presented them an opportunity to assert a respectable status within Islam, especially during the early colonial period when Sunnis were also disparagingly labeled as wicked murderers by Orientalists such as Colebrook. In response to the changing political and ideological landscape, the Dawoodi leadership demonstrated innovative strategies by adopting the language of discourse appealing to the British, the new lord of the land. The earliest example of this shift is Qutubji Burhanpuri's Muntaza al-Akhbar, Extracted News, written in 1824 in Surat, Gujarat. This two-volume text is written in Arabic. As the title suggests, it is in Akhbar tradition, that is historical report, where the history of the community is narrated through the selected events taken from the life of each dāʿī. In Isma'ili literary classification, Akhbar is categorized as exoteric or Zahiri, which suggests the text was not meant to be read only by the ecclesiastical elites, but it could be read by and circulated among wider audience, possibly also to the British. An ethnography conducted by a British officer, Edward Connolly, among the Bohras of Ujjain in 1837, mentions the name of Muntaza as one of the most authentic historical accounts of the community. The author, Qutbuddin Burhanpuri, was a distinguished scholar and a high-ranking dāwa officer, that is Hudud, between 1790 and 1825 approximately. He witnessed several critical changes within the community and beyond. His close association with the Duat of his time and his first-hand knowledge of the Dawa affairs make the Muntaza an indispensable source for understanding the history of the Bohras in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. It is not clear whether Burhanpuri composed the text at the behest of his patron dāʿī, that is Abd Ali Saifuddin, or of his own volition. Nonetheless, the numerous manuscript copies produced subsequently and the continued study of the text at the Jamia Safia, the apex Dawoodi seminary in Surat, suggests that it was and continues to be endorsed officially as the accurate historical account of the community. In this presentation, I will examine three key elements to support my argument. First, the Muntaza presents a chronological history that begins with the birth of Islam and extends to the author's own time. The first volume presents a summary of the lives of Prophet Muhammad, Ali, and 20 Fatimid Isma'ili Imams up to Al-Amir. The second volume opens with a brief biography of the 21st Imam, Al-Tayyib, followed by an account of the Yemeni Duat, situating the Dawoodi Duat at the end. The physical division between the two volumes symbolizes a shift in leadership from Imam to the dāʿī, from Zuhur, that is the age of manifestation, to Satr, the age of concealment, and from the Ahl-e Bayt, the people of the Holy Family, to the Naib, vice-regent of the Imam. Notably, there is no symbolic indication marking the relocation of Dawa from Yemen to India in the mid-16th century. Instead, the post-schism history of the Dawoodi Dawa is presented as a continuation of the order of leadership began in Yemen. The narrative conveys a sense of linear progression and continuity, presenting the Dawoodi leaders as the rightful representatives of the Ahl-e Bayt during the period of concealment. This position is buttressed through a fundamental Shiite theological principle related to the interpretation of Surah Al-Ra'd of the Quran. The Bohras believe this Quranic interpretation or injunction as a divine mandate, emphasizing the perennial necessity of a leader to guide the community. By contrast, Origin histories written in the 16th and 17th centuries, such as Sittar Isail, Kitab Pili Midu, recount the conversion of local communities and the renowned Rajput ruler Siddharaja Jaisingh of Patan, along with his ministers, through the martial and magical feats of early Isma'ili missionaries in Gujarat. In fact, at least two dynasties of Indian Duat, including the current ruling lineage, trace biological descent from the same Rajput royalty. While these narratives of local origin were not abandoned in the Muntaza, they were employed to augment the story of the institution originated in a specific branch of Shia Ismaili Islam. In doing so, Burhanpuri established a framework for the future historiography of the Dawoodi Dawa, including the works like Mausam-e-Bahar, which is in Lisan al-Dawa, Gulzar-e Dawoodi, First English History of the Community, written in 1920, and Ad-Duat al-Akramin, a Gujarati account of the community written in 1937. Second, Burhanpuri lists the precise names of the Fatimid Tayyibi Imams and their later representatives, that is the dāʿīs, recognized by the Bohras, clearly distinguishing his tribe from the Nizari Ismailis. He buttresses the legitimacy of each Imam and dāʿī through the Shia theological principle of authority, that is Walaya, which relates to a prophetic hadith tradition asserting that Prophet Muhammad designated Ali as his heir and successor at Ghadir al-Kham in 1632. Like other Shia communities, the Bohras hold nomination or nas as the legitimate mode of succession. Burhanpuri places particular emphasis on each nomination and succession, meticulously documenting the dates and names of all witnesses to each event, implicitly claiming to present the list of rightful leaders of Islam, beginning with the Prophet himself. Simultaneously, he reaffirms the Bohras' resolute adherence to Shiite practices. Thirdly, Burhanpuri presents a unique history of persecution, migration, and survival that contributes to a culture of secrecy among the Bohras. He illustrates how the military actions and territorial expansion carried out by the Duat served as a defensive strategy to protect the community in a hostile environment in Yemen, where the nascent Tayyibi Dawa faced formidable political and religious adversaries, particularly the Zaydis. Although the conditions in India were more conducive to the Dawa survival than in Yemen, the Bohras continued to face relentless persecution by the Sunni sultans of Gujarat and later by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, which compelled them to resort to dissimulation. A persistent threat to life, livelihood, and religious practices necessitated the continuous relocation of the Dawa headquarters, moving from Ahmedabad to Jamnagar, then to Ujjain, and lastly to Surat. A critical shift occurred following the migration of Tayyibi headquarters to India. Burhanpuri indicates that in different geopolitical contexts of early modern Gujarat, the role of the Dawoodi Da'i, was strictly limited to spiritual leadership. They completely abandoned their military actions against other religious or political elites and ceased laying claims to forts and territories. In fact, Burhanpuri highlighted the amicable relationship between the Dawoodi Duat and other ruling elites, stressing that under the ethical leadership of the Da'i, the Bohras have lived as obedient subjects, adhering to the law of the land. For instance, he composed a lengthy exposé praising Daud bin Qutb Shah for his grace, piety, and wisdom, which ultimately won the admiration of the Mughal Emperor Akbar, who granted his royal seal of legitimacy to the Dawoodi Dawa. So the three outcomes derived from this narrative are as follows. First, the spiritual origin of the Dawoodi Dawa is an Egyptian or Fatimid branch of Shia Ismailism. Second, the Dawa has been led by an unbroken lineage of rightly guided preceptors who are not related to Persian Nizaris. Finally, the Bohras are law-abiding subjects, and relentless persecution at the hands of Sunnis compelled them to migrate from place to place in search of safety to life and livelihood, and live in secrecy. However, a more complex configuration of the Da'i's authority emerges from an archival document which details a complaint filed by the 44th Da'i, Tayyib Zainuddin, against the ruler of Kutch with a British agent in Surat in 1833. The complaint addresses the mistreatment of the dāʿī and his son by local Hindu traders or baniyas who stopped them from entering Mandvi, a medieval port town in Kutch, on horseback. The dāʿī asserts that despite the Kutch Darbar assured him of all proper honors and issued a travel pass, the baniyas prevented their entry, contending that no Bohra had ever entered the town on horseback. Following a series of unsuccessful negotiations, the Banyas remained resolute, prompting the dāʿī to perceive this as a serious offense to his honor. Ultimately, he attributed the humiliation he faced to the Rajput rulers' failure to intervene, adding to his complaint, "If the fault is not with the rulers of that country, where shall it rest? Everywhere else was I treated with due respect, and only at this place have I been dishonored. I am convinced that the British government will not let this affront pass unnoticed, but will require an explanation on the subject." Three critical points emerge from this incident. First, the complaint clearly serves as a declaration of the dāʿī's allegiance to the British, as the protector of the honor or abru of local merchants against the old elites who were failing to keep up the honors and status tied to local community leaders. Second, it shows the delicate power dynamics between the merchants and rulers and illustrates the long-standing processes through which merchants have asserted their power in the region, where the importance of trade and traders, given Gujarat's geographical location, cannot be overstated. Historically, merchants not only shaped the state's policies but took up positions in the royal courts. The dāʿī's demand to ride horseback echoes the tale of Jagadev Shah, a 12th-13th century Jain merchant from Kutch who similarly challenged the local Chalukya authority and sought to establish a claim to local sovereignty by appropriating symbols of power intricately linked to royal courts. Historically, in Western India, horse riding and ownership are a prerogative reserved for ruling martial or Rajput groups. The expense, scarcity, speed, and bravery of horses in battle have made them an emblematic of Rajput court culture and status. Scholars have demonstrated that various groups aiming for higher social and political status could have elevated their standing by adopting symbols of authority linked to more powerful groups and such assertions expressed through local idioms and expressions of power were legible to all parties. Dāʿī Zainuddin's attempt to ride a horse illustrates his assertion to bolster his authority by leveraging the symbol of royal power. This also reflects the confidence the Bohras had acquired under the British rule. To conclude, this chapter shows how, amidst the Orientalist misinterpretations related to the Bohra's spiritual origin, the Bohras began valorizing their origin in Fatimid Ismailism, which also provided them an opportunity to inscribe their respected status within Islam. Tapping into this prospect, the Bohra began composing new style of origin histories, highlighting their unbroken spiritual link to Fatimid Egypt, with their dāʿīs as the lord of the spiritual realm, while refraining from any claims to temporal sovereignty in the colonial state. Nonetheless, to a different set of audience, they asserted a higher status through tapping into the processes of power making pervasive through the region. That is, by appropriating the idioms and symbols of authority intricately associated with local Rajput elites. With that, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vineet. And however, taking the opportunity of being a moderator, I would like to ask a couple of questions before opening up for others to ask their questions, as I'm sure there will be many questions. So one of the first things I because I had also opportunity to look at the abstract you shared before with us, and as you argue, since the 19th century, the Bohra community or Bohra authority progressively redefined itself from a particular brand of Islam rooted deep in the history or traditional culture. Culturally, they are very intertwined with the Fatimids or part of the Fatimid Isma'ili community. However, what is happening actually this redefinition has transformed the India sort of caste and Bohras into a global community when you're arguing, but in terms of development of the religious authority, what is like puzzling here for me is that they have been part of this tradition for many years, and obviously several successions happened during the Fatimids, and then suddenly the Bohra community kind of followed a different path with the succession and schism which happened during Mustansir and Mustansir's imamate in Fatimid Egypt. Like, what makes them, or from what you're reading, what does it tell us? How they were able suddenly change this form of religious authority and develop their own kind of version of it?
Right. So if I understood your question correctly, what I meant to say that they are not really, say, shifting to something, but they are highlighting the Mustali aspect, the Mustali Fatimid aspect of their identity, which they probably until were not, because we do not have that evidence of that kind of long histories being written. Most of the histories that were written were either focused on the particular say lineage of the dāʿīs, or one or two duat in a particular time, or the transfer of dāwa from Yemen to India. But this kind of long histories were not written, so we do not, or at least in my understanding, we do not. There's no textual evidence that highlights this clear-cut Mustali and then Dawoodi kind of lineage, and that began to be highlighted at this time. So that's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. And like the other question I would like to also, you're sort of trying to obviously take a kind of different approach from what has been already produced, and it's more kind of methodological question that you're sort of trying to examine the implication of the post-colonial identity of the Bohras and the Muslim communities in South Asia by sort of also tracing what the colonial period knowledge has been produced and how much it has shaped their sort of self-perception or identity of these communities, right? But another passage when I was looking through, you also coming up with this sort of at the same time you're asserting or grounding a multi-modal range of methods and theories from the field of history, religious studies, and anthropology, which are mainly developed in the West. So how much it would be different outcome, like the expectation from this research?
So my strategy is to sort of apply multi-modal range of methods and to contextualize those methods in longue durée history, to understand what these sources tell and to analyze it in the context of longue durée to see how those developments had taken place. So that's one of the methods that I've been using. So instead of relying on one set of particular sources or one particular methodology. So yeah, well, I thank you for your questions.
We would like to take the opportunity and thank you once again for your time and wonderful presentation. And we are looking forward, obviously, once you're done, inviting you here and give another presentations. And if you're attempting to publish it, to share the book with us. And yeah, wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Dr. Dāģī. It would be my pleasure, absolutely.
Thank you, Vineet. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you.